What is the furthest distance that you think you could ever run in a single day? A couple miles? What about a couple marathons? On Friday, May 29th, I set out on my own kind of running adventure to see just how far I could run in a day. This is the Lucie Beatrix podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I ran 76 miles on the track in 17 hours this past Friday. And this is the story behind that crazy Viking ultra endurance challenge that I set out to do all by myself. I should mention before I get started that I have a Patreon. You can find the link in my bio, and feel free to become a patron of the show if you want some insider Viking tips and tricks behind how I set out to do all these crazy adventures. And I might even throw a few guided runs in there. I'm still filling out the whole Patreon thing, but it would be really, really meaningful if you decided you wanted to support the show and everything I'm doing here in Brooklyn. If you've been listening to the past few episodes of my podcast, you may have heard about the solo marathon I did on the track that was completely spontaneous and unsupported, as well as the other couple marathons I did around the city just on a whim because I was feeling good. And with so much crazy stuff going on in the world right now, sometimes the only thing I know how to do is run around in circles. I signed up for the Orchard Street Runners 100-mile global running challenge on a whim after a few of these spontaneous solo marathon missions during the COVID shutdown. After running my first sanctioned marathon last December, I began toying with this idea of covering more than 26.2 miles in a day, or dipping my toes in the world of ultra endurance. This virtual event that they put on seemed like the perfect excuse to take a stab at something new. And with my job on hold, it's not like I had anything else going on. So, Friday morning, I decided to go for it. I woke up around 3:30 in the morning and I was restless. I could not sleep. I probably got like 3 hours of sleep that night. I was tossing and turning because it wasn't that I was nervous the way I would get before a race. It was more like my body just knew I was going to go do something bigger and better than I had ever done in my entire life. So it was just more of like anticipation. And I decided not to sweat it. You know, I got enough sleep the entire week leading up to this big challenge that I set out for myself that I thought, okay, one night of bad sleep is not going to kill me. And so I rolled out of bed and decided to start braiding my hair and putting on my Viking makeup that I do whenever I do running stuff like races and stuff, and got myself ready. And I put on my Brooklyn Track Club singlet and pretty much like what I would wear for a real race, even though this is a virtual race. And that included a bib that I had actually drawn up with a Sharpie that said the Orchard Street Runners OSR 100. And I put Viking on the top of my bib. So I pinned my bib to my singlet, and by 4:55 a.m., I was standing on the McCarran Park track with my watch and all ready to go. Basically, I was so nervous about the tracking part of this grand mission to set out and run an ultra marathon that I had a watch on my singlet as well as on my wrist because I wanted to double track it with the GPS to try to make sure it's as exact as possible. But I should back up and say there was a lot of preparation the few weeks leading up to this grandiose event, because I knew that going after something as big as an ultra marathon, but not even that, a 100 miler, was going to take a lot more preparation than the solo marathons I had done on my own. In the past, going on those solo marathons the past few months, I would bring like a half a bottle of water or not very much stuff, just my shoes, my watch. It was just very minimalist. Go out there and run 26.2 miles, do what you can, and you'll figure it out when you get home if you need to like eat and stuff. But for this, that's not at all how I went into it, because I needed a lot more than a half a bottle of water or just winging it. I had to plan, fuel, hydration to the T, gear, have everything ready to go. So the day before setting out to do this ultra marathon challenge, I actually had everything lined up and packed and ready to go. I brought tons and tons of bottles of water and pickle juice and Noon electrolyte drink and just anything I could think of that would be a liquid that might feel appealing for something as big as running for over a dozen hours. I should also mention that I had someone dedicated to this running event just as much as I was to help me pass off fuel and gear and whatever I would need. And that's the person who I live with, named Alex. Alex basically was wrangled into this whole thing, and not forced, but he was into it, but he became the person that I was depending on the most for pretty much every hour of this entire event. So Alex actually took a day off of work from his job. He works a really hard 9-to-5 job. He's been working from home during the shutdown, and basically he did extra work to make sure that he was available to both document this event and hand me what I needed as far as fuel and hydration. So anyway, so we drove over to the track, and everything was stocked from anything I could ever possibly need, from like Band-Aids and portable chargers and just everything. And we get there, and I said I was committed to start at exactly 5 a.m. So it was actually 4:58. And I thought, well, I'm going to be out here for hours and hours and hours. I'm just going to start. It's not like a race where I'm waiting for a gun to go off. I'm the gun going off in my head. So boom, I go. It was still dark outside, and the McCarran Park track was completely empty. And even though it was like the first few steps of this crazy day, I was completely determined to really spill my guts. I was like, I'm going to do this and go until I can go no longer. And I was surprised because it seems like it would be hard to just even put in like the first few miles, but within minutes, I saw somebody coming towards the track with a camera, and his name is Zandy. Zandy knew that I was going to do this a challenge or attempt, and he himself is kind of an ultramarathoning legend. No, he is an ultramarathoning legend because he's been written about in National Geographic for doing these crazy ultramarathons, over 100-milers in extremely brutal environments and winning them. So he's a pretty big deal. And so he showed up within my first few minutes of being out there. And he started taking some pictures and cheering me on. So to see Zandy right at the start, the fact that he had taken a break from his busy life as a new dad to drive all the way down to Brooklyn and hand off some items to Alex that he knew I was going to need later, like gels and a handkerchief that can have ice in it because he knew it was going to be a hot day. That was so much mental support for me. So I just my head was in the zone. Seeing him there on the bleachers next to Alex while they both took pictures gave me this boost, and it was the perfect way to kick off the day. So Zandy knew that my goal was to hit 100 miles in a day, and he was all about it. We had been chatting for weeks leading up to it, and he was actually one of the first people who really made me feel like I could do it, because he kind of knows my style of training. We have very similar approaches. We're very feel based, but also we're really big on volume, and we just run a lot. So I told him how I was going about training, and he gave me the confidence that I should go after because he knew I had it in me. So anyway, he snapped off some pictures and shouted out a few more cheers before he left, and he went back to his life. I think I was about 10 miles in by then. And when he left, shortly after, I was greeted by my very first coach, who I met in 2016, named James Chu. Suddenly, I see James running towards me, and on the track, he had a mask on, and obviously we were abiding by social distancing stuff that's going on right now. But it was crazy because I was like, here's James, who had introduced me to the entire running community in New York City back when all I ever knew was running on my own. And I had been so oblivious back then to all the different teams and races out there. So James was kind of my gatekeeper who showed me this whole other side of running. So seeing him there and sensing his excitement as I was going after this big running event or big running attempt, gave me a sudden burst of energy to pop off those first 20 miles with such enthusiasm. And yeah, so James came, did a few miles and left. And he said that I actually had motivated him to even run that day, which was pretty cool. And I thought about how ironic it was how back in the day when I first knew James and he took me on as one of his athletes, I avoided the track like the plague. And I opted out of all the workouts that James would prescribe me, saying, oh, it's okay, I'll just do this on my own. I'll do it on the treadmill. And I hated the track then. But there I was alongside him, devoting my entire being to the track. And it felt somewhat spiritual, or like things were truly coming full circle in like my running life. After James left, it wasn't long before I had crossed that first marathon mark. So I did a full marathon on the track, which wasn't the first time. I had done that a few months ago. But I crossed that mark, 26.2 miles, and decided, okay, I'm going to keep going. Obviously, I felt great. And I just knew I needed to change my shoes, put some ice down my sports bra because it was starting to get kind of hot. And before I knew it, I was back at my steady state pace. I was taking it really chill, but I was ahead of my projected pace, like what I was going for. And I kind of thought, like, while it was cooler, it wasn't too hot yet, I should try to get in more mileage, and then I can always go easier when it starts to get hotter. So I drank some pickle juice, I ate some dates and a banana and a gel, and just started taking in some calories because I knew I still had a long ways to go. It was about 33.3 miles in, or a third of the way of 100, or my goal was 100, that I really said to myself, I've got this. Then the next less than 20 miles started to like fly by. I was just noticing the track was getting a little bit more crowded, and I would just see how the day was progressing. I waved to a few of my old teammates from North Brooklyn runners who were doing their workouts. I saw some Brooklyn Track Club people doing some of their workouts. It was kind of funny. I felt like I was waking up with the track as it got later into the morning. By 1 p.m., I was around I think it was 6 hours into it. A little bit longer than that. 2 marathons deep, I was feeling great. And I was living for every mile that was being clocked off. As soon as I was around the halfway point, it was like a complete change of my mentality, thinking, okay, I've already got so much of the hard stuff behind me. All I have to do is finish the second half. So first 50 down, only 50 more to go is how I tried to see it in my mind. I was riding this high of seeing all the friends that had been coming sporadically to watch or run a few laps with me, including a podcast host who had me on her show after I had run my solo marathon on the track a few months ago. This podcast, Jen Glantz from You're Not Getting Any Younger, she was there with her dog and she waved to me and said, "Go, Lucie." And so it was kind of cool just to see all these people coming out of nowhere. I was like, it just felt like there was so much community surrounding this in such a strange time where there's been a lot of isolation. And yeah, so I had been warned by the ultramarathoning greats that I know that those feelings of highs can be quickly met by low lows. And even though I knew this, people like Zandy had said this and stuff, there's truly no given in the world of extreme distance running. Like you can't know anything that's going to come forward. You can only control what you can and just hope things go in your favor. And, I had planned to do this on a really cloudy, rainy day, but it was not looking cloudy and rainy at all. By midday, by high noon, actually, it was hot AF. And my spirits were starting to flicker a little bit. I just kept thinking, like, I just hope this is as hot as it gets for the day, because I kind of was like looking up at the sky thinking maybe some clouds will roll through, because it's just starting to get really hot. The humidity was somewhere between 70 and 80%. And it was just the sun beating down on my skin. And I even got kind of nervous because I was thinking I was going to get really sunburned. But luckily, Alex came running towards me with sunscreen every 30 minutes or so and just sprayed me down to make sure I wasn't going to get severely burnt. But yeah, as soon as my spirits were starting to flicker like that, I saw someone speed walking towards me on the track. It was Mary Harvey, who is one of my old teammates from my old team, from North Brooklyn Runners, who is another one of the few people that I know that are like Zandy, who have a few 100 milers under their belt. So she began to come be beside me and give me a quick pep talk for a few laps. She handed off some little packets of applesauce, almond cocoa bars that she said worked really well for her to eat when she was doing her ultra marathons. And in the moment, I didn't really understand what she was saying, but she was saying how they weren't too sweet and like they seemed to settle her stomach and everything. And I was just kind of like, oh, I'm not really feeling hungry right now, but I'll take them. And sure enough, later on, those things were amazing. I was like, these are the best things I've ever tasted in my life. But I'll get back to that. Anyway, so she's handing off these food items to me that I actually ended up giving to Alex and to hold on to for later. And she's giving me advice. And she's just saying, okay, like almost like a drill sergeant. She's like, okay, you're going to drink when you're not thirsty. You're going to eat when you're not hungry. And you can go slower than you think you have to go. And she just kept giving me all these like things to think about, which was really great because I didn't really know what I should be thinking about at that point. And she said that the pace I was on was pretty good. It was like really good to be at that point by 50 miles. And she advised me with some of her stories, like how to go about the second half. Because she said, the second half, it's going to be a pain cave. You're going to go into some really weird places in your head. And she was totally right. And she even said the night, when it turns to night, that's when it gets really, really hard. And I kind of thought, oh no, like it's going to be fine. When it gets dark out, like I'll just be so happy that it's getting cooler and there's not sun out. Or like I was thinking, oh, it won't be bad at all. But oh my God, she was totally right for warning me about the nighttime. Anyway, so she did a couple laps with me. And as soon as she was done talking and giving me some feedback, she had to get back to her job. So she left. And my confidence had really started to flip over. Like I went from on top of the world to kind of like, what am I feeling? And how come I'm a little, like I felt just like a little bit beat. And I figured the past 2 marathons in my legs from the morning were starting to catch up with me. Just as it was getting to the actual hottest point of this blistering day, I was rolling into mile 60. And I could feel myself begin to deteriorate under the beating sun and the humidity. And this is when hydration became practically impossible. Every sip of Noon, Martin 320, plain water, mineral water, or pickle juice that I tried to take in came right back up. I could not take any fluids. My black running shorts were coated in this white, grainy salt that I had sweat out earlier, and my stomach was starting to turn into knots. My mental strength began to wane. But then more people kept showing up to cheer me on. This German girl that I had met on Instagram named Sam showed up with a banana, and she had actually written with Sharpie Viking on the peel. And she handed me this banana and I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. It was just so sweet. It was like the perfect little like boost. And it felt like someone was supporting me that I didn't even know yet. We just met and it was just really sweet of her. So I knew I had to keep pushing, especially because I didn't want to just stop while she was there. But I I have to admit that I had, right before she showed up, I went and had to take a breather and sat down for a second and just was like dying. But then I, when she said she was on her way, I was like, I gotta get back up so I'm not like, not on the track when she's there. But so I kept going with her, and then she had to go do something in Bushwick and, said her goodbyes and said good luck, and I kept going. But then after that, I was really just starting to fade. And a few other teammates showed up. These girls, Amalia and Alexandra from the Brooklyn Track Club. And they're like, hey, they're so perky and happy. They admitted that they just had a couple frosés, which is like this frozen rosé slushy. And they're like, hey, oh my God, let's help you for a few laps. We're here for you, Lucie. And so they're so perky and they're so upbeat. And I'm like, oh my God, like, okay. And like, I let them like go from side to side. They were sandwiching me in the first lane, and they were like upbeat and chatty and distracting me from like my stomach and all the feelings I was having. And so I let them kind of carry me through because I'm like listening to them, and it was just kind of like silly. And then one of them was like talking about something, and I don't even really remember what she was saying, Amalia. And I literally was like, oh, hold on a second. And I like went running towards a bush and just puked like crazy. And then she just kind of was like, oh. And then she kind of went away for a while and was playing with like someone's dog, and then came back. It was just really funny because I just felt like these girls are being so sweet, but I'm just like, I'm in a really dark place. So then things got increasingly more rough from then on. Like, I mean, it just kept getting worse, but I kept moving. At mile 70, another one of my teammates that I had done Nike Project Moonshot with, Elizabeth, showed up like this guardian angel. She's a mom, and she's also a trainer at Equinox, and she's also a really great runner. So she shows up. She comes out of nowhere. She's got like big curly hair, and she just runs onto the track, and she's got this big brown paper bag that was full of an entire bodega's worth of like the essential items, including ginger ale, electrolyte drink, Pepto-Bismol, and Tums, and fruit. And she's like running up beside me and saying, don't talk, just go. Lucie, I'm here for you. I brought cookies. Here, do you want a cookie? And I just was like trying to shake my head, but like I couldn't. And I was like, no. And she's like, are you crazy? Don't talk, just go. And it was just so funny because she was like, she took me from 70 to 71. It was like, it was her just taking me with her energy, basically. So then like right after that, I had sucked on an orange slice that she had given me, and I, took some sips of ginger ale, and I was just like trying to take things like Tums because I had just such an upset stomach, and just letting her kind of nurture me. But then there was this torrential, psychotic downpour, like rain. It went from hot sun to just pouring rain as if we were in a hurricane. And her son, Elizabeth, who had met me at the track, her son and her husband were on the sidelines kind of watching this go down, seeing me like struggling and dying. And her little son was like, Mommy, can we go home? And he looked like soaking wet. And I was like, please go like take care of your family. Like, this is not worth it. Like, get out of here. Cause I almost like, I got to a point where I was like, I didn't want everyone just witnessing me struggling so much. But as the rain was falling, it was good because it cleared off the track, and all the people and stuff that had kind of accumulated throughout the day were gone. And it also distracted any bystanders as I began to do rounds and rounds and rounds of puking my guts out again. So I was heaving and clenching my abdomen and trying to stay still standing because it was like if I went down, it was so much harder to get back up. And I finished I finished this epic round of purging, and it was so gross. But a lady was walking her dog, and I feel really bad for what she saw. I couldn't control myself. Anyway, so I was throwing up, and then this other person shows up, and he had a camera. And there had been a few photographers who had showed up throughout the day, like a few friends. This guy, David Paz, took some amazing photos when I was still in the game, when I was still doing great. And so those were cool. The photographers that came in the morning, they saw some cool stuff. But then the photographer that came after I had just thrown up like crazy, he introduced himself. I forgot what his name was because I was just my head wasn't on straight. And he's like, "Are you trying to run 100 miles?" And I was like, "Uh-huh." And he's like, "What mile are you on?" I was like, 73. And then he like tried to shoot some pictures, but like I couldn't, like I was trying to pick up the pace, but I just couldn't. And yeah, it was really rough. And I felt kind of bad that he didn't get the content he was probably looking for, or he was looking for a struggling runner, and then he might have gotten everything he was hoping. But anyway, so that was when also a bunch more people from my team showed up. Like there was this little group that had started to accumulate over on the side of the track where Alex was. And I saw this and I started to do some strides. I almost wanted to show them like I'm still in it, but I dropped to my knees and kind of landed on the soccer field and let myself just like lie down for a second, because I thought literally I just need to lie down and close my eyes for a second. I was so hot, so dehydrated and sore from throwing up in my stomach that I just let myself lay there. And I opened my eyes and saw 3 figures looking down at me. It's 3 people. One guy was on a bike, and he's like, they go, "Is she okay? Is she gonna be all right?" And hearing that made me go, "Fuck no, I'm jumping back in the game." So I got up and was like, and started running again. And I think I did like, a half mile or something, but I just had to show that I was still in the game. I needed to be in it. And before I knew it, I was up and bolting down the lanes like a racehorse. And so I put my headphones on and put on a few of the songs that were kind of my happy place, and literally felt like I was running for my life. And there I thought about a lot of things as the day really turned into nighttime. It got cooler and I actually got like goosebumps. I don't know how I went from being so hot to so cold, but I got colder, and my mind was wandering. I was thinking about my deceased father, and I thought he's probably smiling down on me as I play some of his favorite tunes in my headphones right now. But yeah, I thought he was there watching me, but then I also thought, why do I feel so terrible? And then I almost didn't even want to remember, it's because you have like over 70 miles in your legs. That's why you feel awful. And this is a lot. So for the last 10K there, and I say this because clearly I didn't make it to the 100-mile mark. That was my goal, but my moonshot goal was to hit 100 miles in a day. That was the challenge put on by Orchard Street Runners, was the 100-mile challenge that I had signed up for. But as I approached my first marathon last fall, I had like my moonshot goal there was to do the Olympic trials, was to make it to the Olympic trials. But then I also had my down to earth goal, which is something that I, came up with on the spot when I was running my first marathon in California last winter, which was, you've got your big goal, but then you've got your what can I actually do goal. And in the moment there, my goal, my down to earth goal was to break 3 hours. So when I was in the moment here in my 73rd, 74th mile, I thought, okay, my down to earth goal is don't die. And my down to earth goal is how far can you run in a day? And if it has to end anywhere now, like in the next, few miles, that's okay, because I was definitely feeling like I needed to listen to my body and what it was telling me. And so towards the end, each lap was getting slower and slower and slower. Those last few miles were really freaking slow. Probably the slowest miles of my life that I've ever logged. But each lap, I was met with cowbells ringing as my teammates were there cheering me on, both physically and virtually, because one of my teammates, Ben Chan, who was actually the third ultramarathoning royal to show up of the whole day, he camped out with a little chair on the side of the track and was on a Zoom call, like where he could have people from our Brooklyn Track Club team tuning in to watch me finishing and stuff. And so he was there. He's been in this position before. He's run ultramarathons and he knows how hard it is after, this far in. So he was there cheering for me, and kind of watching my body shutting down in a way that I've never experienced before, where the throwing up got even more intensified. It was satanic, even, where I'm just bolting off by the tree just to throw up as much as I possibly could and then get back on the track and try to keep going. And so I got to a point where I looked around and wondered if I was actually going to make it. I knew that I should call my mom before, I made any decision, because I wanted to hear what she thought I should do, because she really wanted me to do 100 miles. And we had talked about it, and it was like something really fun that we were kind of bonding over. And so I wanted to see if she, had any advice that was worth, that maybe I hadn't thought of in that moment. So she told me to try to keep going. But she also said, don't die. Like, she gave me the same kind of advice that I was kind of feeling, where it's not worth your life to run 100 miles in a day, which is funny because it made me think about the very first man who ever ran a full marathon, which is, 26.2 miles. He died at the end. And so I had already done over 2 of that, almost 3 marathons by that point. And so, I had to be careful if fluids truly weren't staying down, and, thinking about all of the details like that. And I had texted Zandy and asked him what he thought I should do. And I told him about the fluids, and he gave me the okay if I wanted to call it. Like, he wasn't being a baby with me, or he wasn't babying me. He was saying, if you have to call it because you literally are the most dehydrated you've ever been in your entire life, and you feel like you're going to go to the hospital, then yeah, you have to call it. Like, there's people talk about death before DNF, like dying before finishing a race. That's not going to be me. So at mile 76, I realized that I had reached the point of no return and that I needed to call it. But my heart was so full of gratitude for all the support. So it was like this dichotomy of being just so down and so low, but then also thinking, wow, all these people think I'm amazing and they think I'm doing something huge. And so it felt really good. But I ultimately had to stop my watch for the first time all day at 76 miles deep. Because I should mention, I didn't stop my watch. When I sat down and when I had to lay down on the field stuff, my watch was going. So those miles were being logged exactly how they were. Some people for 100 milers, they might stop their watch or something so that their splits look different. But no, I kept my watch running. So stopped my watch for the first time at 76 miles deep, and it was so hard, and it felt like such a waste almost. But I knew that I'd be able to live to fight another day instead of just die trying. In a daze, when I returned home, I lay my head down and my mind was racing. I didn't know if I felt proud or completely defeated. I was torn between the emotions. I was just happy to be horizontal. And 76 miles in my legs. It was just such a crazy thought. I still can't really wrap my head around it. I cried a little bit with the last drops of energy that I had, thinking, oh man, I hadn't run 100 miles. I was close, so close, but so far away. And, but I also just needed to take care of myself. And I had run the furthest I ever have in my life, which is a huge accomplishment. And yeah, I was just full of gratitude. But that the people that had showed up was really that's what got me as far as I did manage to go. And I have to remember that and hold on to that, because it's something amazing to see how I just wasn't used to that. I didn't think that people would actually respond the way that they did. It was insane to see the messages I was getting during the actual solo race and, all of this support. But at the end of the day, I learned a ton about myself. I learned about hydration and fueling in a way that I never thought I would. And I also felt what I think is the most painful thing I've ever really gone through, besides maybe even death or losing a loved one, which is also incredibly painful. But at the same time, it hurt, but it was also really fun. I understand why people get addicted to this kind of stuff, the ultra endurance world. And I kind of compare it to a psychedelic experience, because you do feel out of body and you do not know how to expect. And there are these low points and high points and just your whole mentality. Everything doesn't make sense the way it does in the real world. You're completely out there. So yeah, it's either like a psychedelic experience or having a baby, which I haven't had a baby, so I don't really know what that feels like. But it just felt like I was like creating something larger than myself. And yeah, I gave birth to 76 miles. Anyway, it was so much fun. And I'm really grateful that Orchard Street Runners even put this challenge out there, because it made me go after something as nuts as what I did. And so who knows what lies ahead as far as ultra running or 100 milers go. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on the 50-mile distance and even the 100-kilometer distance, things that I covered during the race. But 100 miles is flipping crazy. And so, yeah, I'm going to think about how I'll ever approach that kind of distance again. But I will say, sitting on 2 days since I ran this thing, I ran it on Friday. It's currently Sunday as I'm recording this. My legs feel great. I don't even really feel that sore, which I feel more sore when I do miler track workouts, when I'm doing like 100-meter sprints and stuff. I feel way more sore the next day than I do after running a 76-mile run on the track. So who knows what that's about. But so I will say my body's recovering pretty well, maybe just a little bit more tired and a little bit more hungry than usual. But I feel good in general, and I feel glad that I went out there and did this. So yeah, that's my story of running 76 miles in 17 hours on the track. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on Instagram at Lucie the Viking. That's Lucie the Viking. And yeah, let me know what you think, or what kind of distances you're trying to cover or go after. I love seeing all the runs people post and tag me in. It feels really good to feel like I'm inspiring anyone who's trying to do something they've never done before. So yeah, until next time, just be fast. Just win.